The content of this episode may not be suitable for some audiences. Listener's discretion is advised. Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and I discuss the current conventional care model and how relational, emotional, and spiritual truth are foundational for healing all of us. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. The past couple of weeks has just been absolutely gripping. And while we have been focusing on first responders with the upcoming event, Rest and Recover America, the name says more than just the first responders. The confusion, chaos, and disease that is afflicting all of us, our first responders are the ones who respond to the call. And the confusion, chaos, and disease is the fruit of something that we are all experiencing.
In every sphere of life.
And at R.E.S.T, we displace these false ideas and arguments that rise up against the knowledge of the truth that are all afflicting us on a physical level and a mental, emotional level and a spiritual level. So today I want to discuss with you, how can we show up for this reality?
That's a great question. And one, obviously, that we are always striving to perfect, right? But yes, at the end of the day, the so-called mental health care crisis that we're having is afflicting all of us. At R.E.S.T, we don't like to use those terms to identify the state we find ourselves in as a nation, nor what we're really dealing with here, the team of clinicians that we have, nor what I deal with as an educator. I like to, instead of diagnosing the problem, I like to identify these universal principles that speak to the reality of what we're facing. And it's R.E.S.T, right? Instead of addressing the mental health care crisis, I like to say, identify how we facilitate rest for the person, the institution, the company, the family, the situation. So instead of identifying what's wrong, I always know that if there is an affliction, again, if it's spiritual, if it's psychological, or if it's physical, if it's institutional, it doesn't matter. It's if it's government or a church or a family, right? Institutions of government. There's confusion, chaos, and dis-ease somewhere. And we have to dismantle, we have to identify that. So instead of identifying the problem, I like to talk about what I always know is needed when there's conflict. Why? Because if I'm experiencing, and in this case, these first responders, they experience constant conflict, right? So what we might experience in a lifetime, once, twice, maybe 3 times, they are experiencing the brutality of the heightened danger, if you will, conflict, if you will, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. And overtime is standard operating procedure for them. They work incredible hours of overtime, and it places a significant burden on a family. So I'd like to just do my very best to discuss something that would normally, it could take me a week to talk about this. I could take a whole day in breaking this down, but we're only going to have a few minutes really to address it. But at the end of the day, things that afflict us cause us great harm if they go unaddressed and undealt with, right? The stories we hear day in and day out from our first responders are not unlike experiences that some of us have had, but they deal with such a myriad of complex things that most of us don't see in a lifetime, and they have to face these things 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. Imagine what they see in a given week. Not to mention, we work 40, 50-hour week, but these guys are working 80 and 90-hour weeks, if they're lucky. And the burden and the stress upon them is significant. But my mind goes right to the executive whose company is in peril, to the mother, to the father, to the single mom, to the single dad, to the child that doesn't have a mom or a dad, and the amount of stress and anxiety and difficult things that they face. The point is that the Rest and Recover America theme was to address and include not just the brutality and the serious condition that our first responders are in. It is gripping to hear what's behind the uniform. That there is a mind, a heart, a will, a conscience, a feelings, that there's a human being with a spirit, a soul, and a body behind those uniforms. And they're really facing unprecedented things, realities that we never dreamt possible 15, 20 years ago. So we have to remember, I guess, and I think this is why I appreciate you doing this segment, that they're going out on calls from people that are experiencing, as we like to say, unprecedented confusion, chaos, and dis-ease that is afflicting their own lives. Every institution that we can imagine, that we can think of right now, is feeling this significant paradigm shift. And we just have to remember that those institutions are made of people just like us. So today we're inviting everyone to look inward. So I think one of the things that bears mentioning is, how do we help the people we serve? For sure, the first responders that we heard from, and we're going to continue that conversation, but we don't do anything different with our first responders than we do with our general population. We really dismantle, as you said, arguments and ideas that rise up against the knowledge of the truth. Where do those arguments and ideas show up? They show up inside of us, conflicting thoughts that often are intrusive and assaulting, and outside ideas and circumstances and things that are often insulting and confusing. And they afflict us. They afflict us emotionally and they afflict us spiritually. Right here in this office, the baseline is always taking a history of the thing. We do this with our first responders. It's the famous timelines, right? That they dread because they don't want to go back and relive those things. But it's no different than what a doctor asks you for when you go to a doctor visit. They need to know your history, because they're trying to put together this puzzle to see how you've processed, governed, directed, regulated, controlled, and restrained, how you showed up for that history. Why? Because they're trying to educate themselves, inform themselves, and you perhaps, and certainly throughout the course of that appointment, what should be done. The problem is that the standard of care, when they take your history, when they take your chart, right? You see the doctor, they take your history to determine how you've governed and get this information so they can put these pieces together. The problem is, I know for a fact that they have a very, very limited time. If you get 15 uninterrupted minutes, you're lucky. Well, as you and I know, those are impossible transactions. When you've got a whole person to take into account and to determine what's going on in their lives. Where is the confusion? Where is the chaos? Where is the dis-ease? So we have to learn to rely heavily on our capacity to reason. So even a doctor has to hear with his ears and listen with his heart. to determine, because those two things perform very different functions, to determine what the best way to do what? To displace the confusion, chaos, and disease happening in that person's body. You have to identify it, diagnose, treat, and cure. That's the standard of care. Diagnose, treat, and cure. How can you possibly do that in the amount of time that they have? And they have to send you to get all these x-rays and exams and all these different things so they can have data. And we all appreciate that because we don't want anybody guessing. But when you're in a crisis situation, you don't have the luxury of many of those things. And when people come here, they've already done all those things and none of it is working for them because they've been generally what? Medicated. And they have a whole bag of meds because we try this and we try that. Well, this affects this and this affects that. And so there is so much frustration, not just around the situation that brought them in the door, but now we have the frustration of all the meds they threw at me. Every single first responder, every single one that has come through my door has had suicidal ideations because in the standard of care model that they face, the first thing they do in their very first appointment is give them meds. And then they have to go through a long, long, long process to see if they're going to be accepted or not for the basic care that any one of us could get from our insurance company. Not them. It is a long, 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 long process. And here's the problem. That's a predictable on-the-job injury. Is PTSD. Of course it is. Look at the nature of the job. So the problem is, what do you think people do? What do you think they do from that first appointment till they can do the QME and go through the whole thing so they can get workman's comp and get approved so they can rest, so they can retreat from this, regroup, examine and break down what's happening in their spirit, their soul, their body, their system, where the disconnections are, so they can get back to work. But if that process takes 6, 9, 12, 8 months, well, it takes 6 to 9 months to get approved. If you're lucky, you go through the process in 2 and 3 months, and I've never seen it, by the way. But what do you think they're going to do between that time? Take their meds. Because they're throwing pills at them. Nothing else is approved. Now, if they break their back or bone or anything, oh, no problem. That's going to get resolved right away. But when their mind, their heart, their will, their conscience, their feeling is broken because it's disenfranchised from their brain function, disenfranchised from even their body, they're disassociated, they have to wait. But what do you think they're going to turn to? Alcohol. Women, gambling, meds. And if they don't give enough meds, they're going to medicate with other things. But you know what? It's happening to the general population too. And that's why I do appreciate that you brought this subject up. Because the confusion, chaos, and disease that is upon us, that is afflicting every single one of us, and we're seeing the fruit of it in our families, in our relationships, in our children, does have a spiritual, a psychological, and a physical consequence. And the minute they come in this door, I've had to learn to listen very carefully with my heart, but hear what these guys are telling me. And at the end of the day, the standard of care and how we're showing up for them is making them crazy. It is just the reality of what's happening. Who can wait that long for intervention? But even when the intervention comes, they diagnose, they treat, and they cure. And the delays for treatment are very long, but the visits with the therapist, with the doctors, are short, unless it's the timeline. But it's almost like it feels sometimes to me like they're gathering all this information to see if there's loopholes or to make them prove themselves that in fact, this is what they need. And I feel like the standard of care just too often doesn't create a culture of rest and healing. And why is that important? Because after that doctor is done with that first appointment with you, no matter what do they say? Go home and rest. Take this and rest. Do this and rest. Oh, okay. What does that even mean? So I want to encourage everyone today, I suppose, as I do our first responders every day that we work with. Hey, the mental health care crisis is from the confusion, chaos, and disease. It's not what's wrong with you that we need to keep identifying. It's what we need, and we all need rest to heal. And so in this office, I've just asked that, look, we have clinicians. They diagnose, they treat, and they cure, but they take their time, and they do not do the 5, 10, 15-minute thing. On the contrary, we do the hour, 2 hour, 3 hour thing, however long it takes. I am an educator. I inspire, I instruct, I motivate. But I draw from science, philosophy, theology, and all these things. And I think we have an alternative, an expanded way, perhaps, to grow beyond the diagnose, treat, and cure model.
Mark your calendars for a night of impact at the Rest and Recover America Gala on Thursday, October 9, 2025, at the stunning Villa Tortorella. Join us for an unforgettable evening, a gala celebrating our first responder community and supporting the efforts of Rest and Recover America as they provide life-changing mental health services to first responders. There will be a dinner, special guest speakers, including our keynote speaker, Hedia Miramati Falco, and a silent auction. Tickets are limited, so don't wait. Secure your spot today at the link in the show notes. Together, with your support, we can directly strengthen and expand our mission to restore well-being and renew capacity to thrive for our first responders. Join us for a night of hope, celebration, and giving back. Get your tickets now.
That is my belief system. Because it doesn't matter what you're dealing with. At the end of the day, my goal, my aim, and what I do here and what we do at R.E.S.T is we displace the confusion, chaos, and disease of whatever's afflicting them, whether it's cancer, autoimmune diseases, broken relationships, broken jobs, broken companies, broken ministries, broken political systems, broken whatever. It doesn't matter. We identify, we get the history of the thing. We hear and listen very carefully to how this individual has governed and how the history has informed their development. Why? So we can get some traction, and this is how we do it. The baseline is what is true and what's not. We have a lot of biometrics to determine that while we're talking to everyone almost every day that they step into this office. So what we teach from the R.E.S.T matrix is to identify what's true and what's not. We can all have different angles of a thing. We can all have different perspectives, but truth is not relative to my perception. And it seems like it's the either or and the and, that it can all come together, but it isn't. When you peel back the nature of a thing, it's an either or situation. And those are painful transactions. I think opinions are valuable, but at the end, we need to do our very best to get to the truth of a matter. So why is that important? Because even if it's painful, if it's difficult, if it's terrifying, it's the truth of a thing, and walking into that space with people that makes it possible for them and for us to begin to protect their heart and to help them how to navigate these transactions in their soul. I have observed, and I have evidence to prove, that once a person comes face to face with the truth and they're able to embrace it, that it does something to their heart, even if it's painful. And it causes them to leave our office, Jonathan, with hope. Why? Because they begin to experience measures of peace. Even if we realized through data, through information, irrefutable information, that yes, they were abused as a child. And yes, the memories and the bizarre things they thought about their uncle were true. And those weren't just strange feelings they had about the uncle. It was just a suppressed memory. When they come to grips with the reality of that, that's brutal. That's a horrific thing to have to face, is abuse from a family member that you suppressed and you dissociated from. But once you embrace the truth of that, guess what happens? They get traction. And that traction gives them movement because they have feet to stand on. And it gives them a measure of peace, even if it's terrifying. So the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, and what? All of a sudden, this peace that comes, that gives them the capacity to get traction and move forward. We do that with our first responders, and we do that with our general population. Truth, to access how the soul, the psychology of a person managed a situation, is the breastplate of righteousness. And then the sandals of peace is that immediately, and we hear it 100% of the time, wow, that was intense and brutal, but I'm exhausted, but I feel hope. Why? It's the sandals that get movement, right? But what comes next? Easy, intuitively, they begin to have faith. It's this shield of faith that is intuitive that comes up. Why? Because when things come at you that are lies, you have a defense against them, and you're not without protection, if you will. And we all need to protect and guard ourselves against lies. We all need to seek the truth in spite of our opinions about a thing, about anything, and all things. But intuitively, if you have a shield, you know, wow, this is kind of like a battle I'm in. Yeah, you need a sword. You need something to defend yourself with. And it's kind of interesting because this shield that protects us from lies, the defining force in helping us protect ourselves from lies that we shield ourselves from, is the truth, the word that pierces the darkness. The darkness is anything that causes us confusion, chaos, and disease. So all of a sudden, you've got this armor, right? The belt of truth, it holds the whole uniform together, right? The belt of truth is the first pursuit of rest. When people come in the door, I know they have stories they tell themselves, things they've experienced, but simultaneously I'm documenting what their body's holding on to. And we do it through a lot of different modalities. We talk about those all the time. But why am I doing that? So that as I'm getting their history, I'm helping them slowly distinguish, and I'm getting information on what's true and what's not about the things they're remembering and how they're processing that information. So that belt of truth is foundational for me to help them have access, full access to their mind, their heart, their will, their conscience, their feelings. I can't give them a pill for that. I have to give them time, attention, and care for that. My team, everybody here, that's the requirement. Even our doctors, our psychiatrists, and our therapists, they have to give that time. So the person can feel and experience love. And once they do that, that shield goes up instantly. They feel a little stronger when they came in than when they left. Why? We examined the truth of a thing, terrifying as it may be, and that simultaneously has helped us distinguish what's true and what's not. And they feel seen, heard, and understood. And that is a shield that guards their heart. And immediately they feel like they can stand up, get traction, even if they're crushed. So who has the power when they leave? They do, not us. Even if they feel weak, they're empowered. From what? Their own natural resources. So the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the sandals that give you the capacity to go out and walk in peace. That's how we send everybody out here. Whether they can experience it in that moment or not, that's what happens. And then the consequence is they feel a little bit more emboldened to have faith in us and in themselves, and even in the power of their story, brutal and painful as it may be. And then what's the fruit of that? The fruit of that is, man, okay, I'm strong enough. I got to show up. I've got a lot of natural resources to do battle. And those natural resources are consistent with laws of nature. They're obvious. They're universal to all. Everybody has access to that sword, right? It's self-evident, and it's going to speak to my natural affection that if I'm preparing for battle or against confusion, chaos, and disease of the age, or of my circumstances or of my story, right? Then what am I going to do? I'm going to pick up a sword. And here's the last part. Shoot, only one vital organ is exposed, my brain. And we're told by this ancient document, right, where these physical, tangible, figurative, and literal battles were a part of their lives, right? In ancient times, the helmet would save them, because if their brain goes, that's not a good thing. So you got to protect your brain. Standard of care in conventional medicine today, an allopathic medicine, is backwards. We medicate the brain to protect the body, and we spend minutes, if we're lucky, being able to accurately assess what is true and what's not about their circumstances. And we sure as heck can't guard their heart or protect them. And there is no peace other than in the meds and whatever the doctor thinks. And although that is often necessary, it is not going to solve the problem and the crisis we're in. We're a nation in crisis. And the standard of care for our first responders, for the general population, and for us has got to include protocol beyond the quick consults. In closing, I would just say this. It is insanity to expect our first responders to wait 6 months to be approved, 3, 6, 9 months to be approved. And no business can sustain and leverage that kind and carry that kind of overhead to meet their needs. And that's what's happening. And the standard of care of diagnose, treat, and cure that medicates first and then they treat later can be improved upon greatly. And that's all we advance here. Another example, if I could, just briefly. You have an anxiety attack. You can't get out of bed because you have chronic depression. You try to get in to see a psychiatrist. If you're a first-time client, they might get you in really fast, if you're lucky. But you try to go get those meds refilled or see the psychiatrist again. It's complicated, is all I'm saying. And there's great psychiatrists, there's great therapists, there's great doctors. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the system is broken and it's overloaded. So we have to take personal responsibility and think of alternative ways that we are going to begin to learn how to care for ourselves and each other. It has to happen. The crisis is too great.
I originally had a lot of questions to ask you, but I didn't want to stop you because you were painting a really clear and concise picture of not just what these first responders are facing, but all of us are. You're giving tangible language to some of these things that maybe we're not even consciously aware of, and you're bringing it to the forefront. Thank you.
I want people to feel hope and not to listen to this and say, wow, we're in a lot of trouble. This is depressing. No, we already know we're in a lot of trouble. We see the problems, but I want you to find hope that the greatest resources and the best standard of care is within you. And laws of nature, things that are universal to us all, if you can just stop and think, regardless of what this is going to cost me, I'm going to get to the truth of a matter within myself, in my relationships. And to do that, I want to encourage you to be willing to receive criticism and to be critical without fearing judgment. Because we can be critical of a thing and be judgmental of a thing and bring life to a thing to hedge destruction, to hedge decay. It is not the loving thing to do to not criticize a person, a thing, a situation, and certainly not an institution. But we can do it with a great deal of decency in pursuit of the truth, because anything that is not true will destroy us all. So if we can change perhaps our motive and our approach to come to these difficult discussions, these difficult situations, and certainly to these difficult times with clean hands and a pure heart, and be truth seekers, that's the beginning of guarding our hearts and everybody else's hearts. And it's going to give us the capacity to walk in peace. Then faith becomes easy. And picking up swords, it's not to use against each other. It's to use against arguments and ideas that rise up against the knowledge of the truth. And then don't forget, put on your helmet of salvation. Protect what goes in your brain. And that means electronics. Be careful what you're looking at. Be careful what you're listening to. Be careful where your phones are at night when you go to sleep. Protect your brain, because I do believe the assault is always on your heart, right? The mind, the heart, the will, the conscience, that's the battle. It's for control over this. But if you can take your brain, your eyes, your ears, and your mouth out of commission, and it can be used as an instrument of destruction, then we're doomed. And it doesn't have to go that route. Take every thought captive and bring it in obedience to the truth. Only one person that ever lived said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And that is very well documented in a canon, and that substantiates the life of Jesus of Nazareth. And I would encourage every one of you to see and become curious and ask questions. Is that the truth? He said, I am the truth. Become curious about that. Even if you're bitter, even if this makes you angry, that's okay. Be angry. At rest, everything rises or falls in our understanding of the truth. And only one living human being in recorded history said, I am the truth. I am the way and I am the life, because I am the Son of the I Am. He's not going to be, he's in the I Am. So when we're inviting you into this place of rest, we want you to know we're always going to go for history to understand government and education in everything. And this topic is no different. So I want everyone to feel hope and be curious and question everything and pursue truth. It'll save your life.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.